The week before Christmas, Chicago looked like a snow globe that someone had shaken and left on a shelf, cold, gray, and dusted with the kind of snow that never seemed to stick. Every window on my block flickered with colored lights, green and red and gold, but my own apartment stayed mostly dark. A single strand of fairy lights twined around a tiny potted pine on my windowsill, glowing soft and warm against the chilled glass. I'd meant to buy a proper tree, but every year I found a reason not to. My studio was neat, organized almost to a fault, books stacked in careful towers, a crocheted blanket folded at the foot of my Murphy bed. Still, there was an emptiness that I couldn't fill with order. The silence was so steady, I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen. I kept checking my phone, sometimes every few minutes, sometimes with hours in between, like I was trying to prove to myself that I didn't care. But each time, all I saw were group texts from coworkers about Secret Santa and pictures of someone's cat tangled in tinsel. Not a word from home. A year ago, I'd driven 6 hours in the December dark, trunk packed with carefully chosen gifts for everyone, Dad's favorite fudge from the bakery near my place, a scarf I'd knit for Mom, a signed book for Madison. Madison, of course, arrived late with store-bought cookies and a story about her busy schedule. By dessert, she was showered with praise for her thoughtfulness, while I was handed a leftover slice of pie in a plastic container. I remembered that drive home on empty highways, Christmas music humming through the static. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe next year would be different. But as the days ticked down this year, I realized nobody was even pretending anymore. On Tuesday, the phone finally rang. I was halfway through wrapping a mug for the office gift swap, hands sticky from tape. "Emily, honey," Mom said, her voice syrupy sweet. I felt something in my chest tighten, but I tried to sound cheerful. "Hey, Mom." She didn't ask how I was. She never did, not really. Instead, she launched right in, "I just wanted to talk about Christmas this year." There was a pause, and I could hear something, maybe the television, maybe the clink of dishes. With everything going on, and the way things felt last time, we thought, maybe it's best if you take some time for yourself. For a second, I stared at the blinking lights on my little pine tree. "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know," she said, almost breezy. "You seemed so down last Christmas. Madison mentioned you said Christmas at home was, well, a waste of time." She let the words dangle, heavy and sharp. I gripped the phone tighter. "I never said that." Mom's voice softened, almost regretful, but not quite. "Well, maybe you didn't mean it that way, but Madison felt you weren't really enjoying yourself. And with everything going on, we want this year to be peaceful. No negativity." The word hung there, negativity. Like I was the snow cloud that ruined their parade of lights. It wasn't anger I felt. Not even heartbreak. Just a slow, creeping numbness. I realized, in that moment, that I wasn't even surprised. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Okay," I said, steady as I could. "If that's what you want." She exhaled, relief washing through the line. "We'll call on Christmas Day, all right? Maybe next year, if things feel better." Her voice trailed off. I told her I had to get back to work. She wished me well and hung up. When the silence settled again, it was heavier than before. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything or pace the room. Instead, I set my phone down and finished wrapping the mug, taping the paper with slow, careful hands. Outside, laughter spilled from a neighbor's apartment, distant and bright. I walked to my window and looked out over the street, watching the glow from other people's celebrations flicker against the night. There was a kind of strength in my stillness. I'd spent so many years trying to earn my way into a circle I was born into, only to find the door always slightly ajar, never wide open. This year, the message was clear: I wasn't invited. And what stung most wasn't the rejection, it was how little it surprised me. I thought of the old saying I'd heard once at a church service: sometimes, the greatest peace comes from letting go of what was never yours to begin with. Maybe that's what I was doing now, letting go, piece by piece. I walked across the room, unplugged my fairy lights, and folded the blanket tighter around my shoulders. For a long moment, I stood in the quiet, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the city settling for the night. So that's how it is now, I whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the room itself. And in the hush that followed, I promised myself I would remember this, not as a moment of weakness, but as the quiet beginning of something I couldn't yet name. I woke to the muffled sound of traffic on wet snow and a faint ache in my chest that felt both familiar and new. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and for a moment I let myself hope it was a message from Mom, maybe a quick, "We miss you," or even just a simple heart emoji. Instead, the caller ID flashed: Madison. I answered on the third ring, wrapping my hands around a chipped coffee mug to keep them from shaking. "Hey, Mads." She chirped, the same bright tone she'd used since we were kids, like nothing was ever wrong. I waited for the obligatory, "How was your night?" or even a mention of the call from Mom the evening before. Instead, Madison dove right in. "Listen, I need your help with something. Tuition's coming up for next semester, and honestly, it's been kind of a rough year. Mom and Dad can't really swing it. But you're doing well these days, right?" There it was. Not a question, but an assumption wrapped in a compliment. I stirred powdered creamer into my coffee, watching it cloud and swirl. "I mean," Madison went on, "you don't have a mortgage or kids, so you probably have a little extra. I hate to ask, but could you maybe spot me part of my tuition? Just until I finish my master's. Greg's job isn't covering as much as we thought it would, and, Mom and Dad are stretched thin after the furnace went out." I tried to keep my voice even, careful not to sound like the negative one. "How much are we talking about?" She listed a number, bigger than I expected. "But anything helps," she said quickly. "Just let me know, okay?" I pictured her in her kitchen, sunlight streaming in, coffee in one hand, her voice as light as the whipped cream on her latte. I remembered how, in high school, I'd spent 2 summers bussing tables at the diner to buy a used laptop for college. Madison, meanwhile, got a shiny new one for being cute, as Dad had joked, his golden girl. "Can I think about it?" I asked finally. Of course," she replied, relief rushing out in a single breath. "I knew you'd understand, Em. You always do." After she hung up, I sat for a long moment in my quiet kitchen, looking out at the frost on the window and the empty street below. There was a knot in my stomach that wouldn't untangle, a familiar sense of being pressed into service without ever being asked how I felt about it. I pulled out an old notebook and turned to a fresh page. My handwriting was neat, cautious, as if a wrong word might trigger a landslide. I wrote the word, transaction. The memories came, one after another. Senior year, Madison begging to use my savings for a down payment on her first car, "You'll get to drive it sometimes." While Mom and Dad beamed at her and told me how proud they were that I was such a generous big sister. College break, Madison needed new boots for winter formal, so I loaned her what I'd saved for books, and never saw a dollar back. Every favor, every small request, came dressed up as family togetherness but always cost me something: time, money, energy. I sipped my coffee, which had gone cold and bitter, and thought about how easy it was for Madison to ask, how she'd never even hesitated. For her, help was always a phone call away. For me, asking for anything, support, even a listening ear, felt like an inconvenience. I tried to remember the last time Madison or my parents called just to check in, just to see how I was, not to ask for something or to solve a crisis. I couldn't. A message blinked on my phone, a photo from a coworker, their toddler in a Santa hat. I smiled, then closed the app. It was safer, sometimes, to observe other people's joys than to try and claim any of my own. The morning sun stretched pale fingers across my floor as I put away my mug and glanced at the to-do list taped to my fridge. Pay bills. Prep presentation. Buy cat food. Nowhere on the list, save your sister, again. I flipped back to the notebook. Under transaction, I wrote, what would happen if I just said no? By late afternoon, I'd answered Madison's text, still thinking, let's talk soon, and changed into jeans. I went for a walk through the slushy city streets, boots squeaking, breath fogging in the air. Chicago in December was both bustling and lonely, and I felt like a ghost passing through, invisible even in my own life. Madison's voice echoed in my mind, thanks, Em. You've always been the responsible one. The word responsible felt heavy, not a compliment but a chain. Did they really see me, or just the things I could do for them? That evening, as darkness fell early and the city's lights blinked on, I closed my journal, pressed my palm to the cover, and whispered, not this time. Christmas morning crept in quietly, with the gray Chicago sky pressing low against the windows. Outside, the world felt muffled, no carolers, no kids shouting, just the hush that comes when snow covers even the busiest streets. My apartment was filled with the warm, almost artificial smell of powdered cheese as I stirred a pot of boxed mac and cheese on the stove. The radio played softly, a jazzy version of Silent Night weaving in and out of static. I set a single place at my tiny table, lit a candle, plain, unscented, its light dancing against the chipped white ceramic. It was a small rebellion against the loneliness, a way of saying, I am here, and this day belongs to me, too. No feast, no gathering. Just me and my bowl of noodles, the fork clinking quietly as I ate. The phone pinged. Holiday memes from coworkers, a dog tangled in tinsel, a reindeer filter on someone's baby, a blurry photo of a workplace potluck with the caption, Merry Christmas from the Chaos Crew. I sent a smiley face back and muted the thread. There were no messages from Mom, none from Madison. My family's silence rang louder than any carol. After lunch, I opened my laptop and scrolled through unread emails, most of them ads and digital greetings. One caught my eye, a draft with the subject line, What I Wish I Could Say to You. I'd started it days ago, lines and lines of raw honesty pouring out late at night when the city was asleep and I felt brave. Now, looking at it in the cold light of Christmas, the words felt exposed, too much to send, not enough to keep. I hovered over the delete button, rereading the sentences. I don't know what you remember about me, Madison, but it's never been the truth. My finger pressed down. The draft vanished, leaving nothing but a faint ache in its place. A memory surfaced, one of those childhood Christmases back in Iowa. I was 7 or 8, hands sticky with glue and glitter as I made ornaments for the tree, stars, bells, hearts, each one with crooked letters spelling our names. Madison, still in pigtails, tore open a shiny box with her name on it and found a karaoke machine. The room erupted in applause as she belted out Jingle Bell Rock, and everyone laughed when she got the words wrong. My ornaments hung unnoticed, tucked at the back of the tree. That night, I listened to her sing, feeling both proud and invisible. I pulled on my boots and parka, deciding the walls of my apartment were too close for comfort. The streets were quiet, almost deserted. I wandered to a nearby park where fresh snow coated the benches and playground slides. Families clustered together, tossing snowballs, making snow angels, snapping photos with gloved hands and red cheeks. I watched from the edge, a visitor in someone else's story. No one noticed me, and I found that I didn't mind, not today. Back home, dusk fell early. The city glowed outside my window, lights strung from fire escapes and across street lamps, shining for anyone willing to look up. I brewed tea and sat at my desk, the silence so deep I could hear the radiator ticking. A blank page stared back from my notebook. I picked up my pen, hand steady, and began a letter to Madison. Not an email, not a text, a real letter, ink pressed into paper. The words came slowly at first, then all at once, "You don't even know who I am. You never tried." I stopped, the pen hovering above the page, as if waiting for something, an answer, maybe, or the permission to continue. I thought of all the ways I had tried to earn a place in my family, good grades, careful words, letting Madison take the spotlight even when I wanted it for myself. Each time, it felt like walking into a room where my chair was missing. I stared at the half-written letter, reading it aloud in a whisper. "But I'm about to show you." Folding the page in half, I slipped it into a drawer, not ready to send, not ready to burn. Sometimes, it's enough just to put things in writing, even if no one else will ever read them. As night settled in, I turned on a nature documentary, letting the sound of distant forests and running water fill the emptiness. The single candle burned low, its flame a tiny anchor in the quiet dark. I wrapped myself in a blanket, settled into the corner of my couch, and watched snow fall softly beyond the glass. For the first time in a long time, my sadness felt clean, not sharp or biting, just honest, a space I could breathe inside. Christmas was supposed to be about togetherness, but as I sat in my small apartment, I realized I was finally together with myself. That would have to be enough, at least for now. I didn't say yes. For once, I didn't even feel guilty about it. The relief surprised me, a lightness where I expected to find the old familiar weight. It was as if, by not responding, I'd finally found the space that had been missing since childhood. All week, a bitter wind swept through Chicago, rattling my apartment windows and icing the sidewalks, but inside I felt sharper, more awake. Mornings blurred into afternoons as I logged in for remote meetings, my coworkers' faces floating in little boxes across my laptop screen. I kept my answers polite and my smile tight, but my mind wandered, halfway between spreadsheet cells and the echo of Madison's last call. She didn't give up, of course. I counted 3 voice messages in as many days, her tone breezy at first, "Hey Em. No rush, just checking in." And then increasingly urgent. "Can you just let me know where things stand?" By the 4th, her patience was thinning. "It's not fair to keep me hanging, Emily. I really need an answer." I listened, then deleted each message without replying. For years, my silence had been mistaken for agreement or for weakness, but this time, it was intentional. I wasn't sure what I would say if I answered. Maybe nothing that would change the pattern. On Wednesday, I found myself sitting on my unmade bed, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it was a test I kept failing. I started to record a voicemail, "Madison, I can't help you this time," but erased it after hearing how shaky my voice sounded. I tried again, softer, "I'm sorry, but I need to say no." Delete. A third attempt, "You'll find a way. You always do." Delete, delete, delete. Frustrated, I tossed the phone aside and tried to lose myself in work. But the numbers on my screen swam, and the city outside felt distant, like I was floating just above my own life. A memory drifted up, one of those small, sharp moments you never mean to keep. Madison and I sharing a bedroom as kids, me asking Mom if I could have my own space, even just for a weekend. "Don't be dramatic, Emily," she'd sighed, smoothing Madison's hair instead. I learned early not to ask for too much. By Thursday, the need for clarity had settled into my bones. I called Mom after lunch, my hands cold even as I held the phone. She picked up on the second ring. "Emily? Is everything all right?" I heard the familiar sounds of home behind her, the dishwasher humming, a clock chiming in the hall. I could picture her at the kitchen table, fingers tapping anxiously against a mug. "I want to have a family meeting," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Me, you, Dad, Madison, and Greg. I think it's time we all talk, about Christmas, about everything." There was a pause. I heard her take a breath, as if she'd been bracing for something like this, but hoping it wouldn't come. "Saturday at noon," she finally said, the words cautious. "That should work. I'll let everyone know." I thanked her and hung up, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't look afraid. I looked tired, and ready. That night, I booked a ticket for the bus to Cedar Rapids. It felt strange, traveling so lightly. I didn't pack gifts or homemade food, not even a dress for church. Just jeans, my favorite hoodie, and the laptop I used for work. For years, I'd believed that preparation was a kind of armor. If I showed up with enough, maybe they'd see me. This time, I was going with almost nothing, and that felt like freedom. On Friday, the mailbox clanged. Inside, an envelope with Madison's looping script, sparkly stickers, a snowman stamp. I knew without opening it what was inside, a store-bought card with a glittery tree, maybe a line or two about family love. I turned it over in my hands, the corners sharp, the paper too bright. Then, quietly, I dropped it into the trash, unopened. No more scripts, no more rolls. That evening, I tidied my apartment with a kind of ceremony, folding the blanket, stacking my books, setting the mug on the counter. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I only moved, slow and certain, as if making room for the person I was becoming. When everything was ready, I zipped my old duffel bag and set it by the door. In the hush, I said it out loud, not a shout, just a steady promise to myself, I'm done being the quiet one. Outside, snow began to fall again, frosting the streetlights and turning the city into a silent world of possibilities. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt prepared. The house smelled like cinnamon and secrets. Snow swirled in fat flakes outside the front door as I stepped up onto the porch, my boots leaving clean prints across the mat Mom had set out last summer. I paused, my hand on the brass handle, bracing myself for warmth that would be more about the thermostat than the people inside. Inside, the old place looked almost unchanged, wreaths on the banister, holiday mugs lined up in the kitchen, strings of lights blinking in the window. The air was heavy with sugar and clove, the kitchen humming with the same slow comfort I remembered as a kid. But under the cheer, something cold coiled, tightening my throat. Mom greeted me first, the tray of cookies balanced carefully in one hand. "Emily, you made good time." She kissed my cheek, too quickly, her smile a little too wide. "I just finished a new batch of your favorite snickerdoodles. Coffee?" "Sure," I said, setting my bag down by the door. I shrugged out of my coat and scanned the living room. Dad barely looked up from his recliner, the TV flickering quietly. He grunted, something between a hello and an accusation. The sports channel was on mute, but the sound of the old recliner shifting was sharp and familiar. Greg was already sitting at the table, his shoulders hunched, thumb tapping on his phone. He met my eye for half a second, then looked away. I wondered if he'd been drafted for moral support or just to fill out the numbers. Madison was on the sofa, legs tucked under her, scrolling through her phone like she had somewhere else to be. Her nails were painted a glossy red, catching the light as she scrolled. She didn't look up. The house felt both too big and too small. The decorations, the baking, the forced cheer, none of it could mask the chill underneath. Mom poured coffee into a mug, sliding the plate of cookies across the counter toward me. "Eat, honey, you must be hungry. I know you don't get real home cooking in the city." Her voice was almost too cheerful, her eyes flicking to each of us, searching for reassurance. I took a cookie and sat at the table, feeling the strange weight of old roles pressing in. The kitchen table had always been the center of our family's universe, and yet somehow, I'd always been at the edge. I flashed to a memory, 10 years old, knees pressed to the underside of the folding kid table at Christmas, long after I was taller than any of the cousins. That had been my place. Dad cleared his throat. "So, what's this all about?" His tone was flat, impatient. Mom jumped in, her hands fluttering as she poured cream into her mug. "Let's just hear Emily out. No fighting, okay?" The words settled like dust. For a moment, nobody spoke. I started slowly, pushing the plate of cookies aside. "I want to talk about Christmas. And about something that happened after." My voice sounded even, steadier than I felt. "I want to talk about the lie." Madison looked up, her eyes wide for a fraction of a second before she dropped her gaze back to her phone. "What are you talking about?" she said, too casual. I took a deep breath. "Last month, you told Mom and Dad I called Christmas a waste of time." "That's not true. I never said that." Mom's lips tightened. "Madison said you were upset, that you didn't want to come home." Madison cut in, her voice rising a note. "That's what it sounded like, Em. You're always so negative about family stuff, what was I supposed to think?" Greg shifted, tapping his foot on the tile. He looked like he wanted to disappear. I turned to Dad, who sat forward, elbows on his knees. "You believed her, just like that?" "Nobody asked me." His jaw set, the lines on his face sharpening. "Madison wouldn't lie about something like that." I let out a breath, steady and slow. "She did. And you believed her." The silence stretched, broken only by the faint clink of a spoon against ceramic. Madison kept scrolling, her face carefully blank. I watched Mom's hands, twisting a napkin. Her voice was thin. "We just wanted peace, Emily. It's been a rough year. We thought maybe a little space would help." "A little space?" I said, the words gentle but firm. "Or just enough distance to pretend everything's fine?" Nobody answered. I felt the room contract, everyone pulling into themselves. I reached into my bag and pulled out the unopened Christmas card from Madison, sliding it onto the table. "You called me after," I said quietly, turning to face her. "Asking for money. You remember that, don't you?" "Let's be clear," I said, folding my hands on the edge of the kitchen table. "This isn't about tuition. It's about respect." Outside the bay window, snow fell thick and slow, muting the world beyond the glass. The fireplace crackled, pine logs popping, sparks skating up the flue, yet the room felt colder than any drift outside. Mom's holiday candles flickered on the counter, scents of cinnamon and vanilla twisting into the tense air. No one reached for another cookie. I'd written a line in my journal weeks earlier, "You teach people how to treat you," and now the words hummed in my chest like a tuning fork. I met every pair of eyes in turn, steady and calm, as if I'd practiced in a mirror. "I want you to understand," I began, voice even. "For as long as I can remember, I've been the fallback plan. When Madison needed a down payment for a car, I dipped into my college fund. When the roof leaked, I paused my own grad school savings. You called it family loyalty, I called it a loan that never got repaid. Dad shifted, leather chair creaking. We appreciated it, Emily. You depended on it, I replied, keeping any bite from my tone. But appreciation's not the same as respect. Madison straightened on the sofa, ponytail swishing. I was just being honest when I told them you thought Christmas here was pointless. That's how you sounded, Em. I held her gaze. Honest would have been asking what I actually said. I turned to Mom. You never checked. You believed it because it fit a story we've told for years. Emily's distant, Emily's difficult, Emily can afford it, so why not? Mom's eyes filled, a napkin twisting in her fingers. We never meant to hurt you. Greg spoke for the first time, voice low. Maybe we should all slow down. No, Dad cut in, palm thudding on the arm of his chair. What we need is some respect shown to this family. You don't march in here. I asked for this meeting, I corrected, still calm. Because I'm done pretending silence is kindness. The fire popped. Somewhere down the hall the furnace kicked on, a low hum underscoring every breath. I laid out the timeline, school laptops, dance trip fees, emergency dentist bills they couldn't cover the week I'd been laid off. Each memory surfaced like stones in shallow water. I spoke slowly, giving the words space to land. Linda dabbed at her eyes, Greg studied the floor. Madison's phone lit up on the couch, unanswered notifications blinking like fireflies. Madison's cheeks flushed. So you resent me for needing help? I resent being valued only for that help. I leaned back. Needing isn't the problem, expecting is. Dad opened his mouth, but I lifted a hand. You raised me to be responsible, yes. But responsibility isn't an endless withdrawal you get to make without deposits. It's mutual. Silence settled again, heavy as snowfall on branches outside. At last I slipped a folded paper from my pocket, smoothing it flat, proof of the wire transfer already scheduled to the university. Here's what happens next, I said. Madison's tuition, paid in full. It clears Monday. Mom's head jerked up. Sweetheart, you don't have to. I know. I slid the paper toward Madison, who stared as if it might burn her. It's done. And after that, we're finished. Dad's brows nodded. Finished? You're our daughter. I'll always be your daughter biologically, I answered, voice soft. But family is a daily choice, and I can't choose a place where I'm measured in dollar signs. Madison swallowed hard. You're being dramatic. I almost smiled, don't be dramatic, the refrain of my childhood. Maybe. Or maybe I finally understand my own limits. Mom reached for my hand, I eased it gently away. This isn't punishment, I told her. It's self-preservation. For years I'd dreamed of a scene like this exploding, voices raised, someone storming out, plates shattering. Instead, truth landed like new snow, quiet, undeniable, covering everything in sight. You can have my help, I said, rising from my chair, or my presence. Not both. No one followed as I lifted my coat from the hook. Behind me, the fire crackled, the house settling mid-storm. I zipped my bag, heart steady, and stepped into the hush of falling snow. You'll pay? Mom's fingers fluttered at her throat, as though smoothing an invisible necklace. But you'll still come home, right, sweetie? I shook my head. No. This is it. The living room seemed to exhale. A moment ago the fire had spat bright sparks, now its light felt distant, the warmth stranded behind paneled walls. Somewhere inside me a switch had flipped, and the hum of fear that usually accompanied these conversations simply wasn't there anymore. Dad had told me once, half joking, half warning, you can't buy your way out of family, kiddo. I'd been 16, handing him my first summer paycheck to help with the water heater. Standing here now, I wondered if that was true, or only true as long as I believed it. I'm wiring the full spring tuition to the bursar, I said, voice level. One transfer, scheduled for Monday. After that, I'm stepping back permanently. No texts, no favors, no birthdays. I'll let the bank confirmation email serve as my goodbye. The words sounded clinical, almost mercenary, yet I felt lighter with each syllable. Madison pressed her lips together, a quick flash of confusion crossing her face before she rearranged it into blankness. Greg stayed in his chair, hands folded, the picture of uneasy neutrality. Mom took a step forward. Emily, honey, you're upset. We all said things, well, misunderstandings happen. Let's not throw away years of. Years of what? I asked. It wasn't cruel, it was curiosity, a request for her definition. Her mouth opened, but nothing settled into words. Dad pushed himself up from the recliner, shoulders squared. How dare you put conditions on family help? After everything your mother and I have done? Dad, I said, keeping my tone even, you taught me to be generous, but you also taught me to read the fine print. I've read it. The interest on this relationship is too high. The room grew colder despite the roaring fire. In the hallway, a floorboard cracked as the house adjusted to the dropping temperature, as if eavesdropping. Mom tried again, gentler. We don't want to lose you. We just need to find our way back. I wished I could believe her urgency was about me and not the check. But hope, like any muscle, weakens when it's misused. I'm not lost, I said. I'm standing right here, telling you what I need. Madison cleared her throat, but no words followed. The silence stretched, the first time in my life my sister had nothing to say. I'm sorry, I added, and I meant it, though not in the way they hoped. You've mistaken access for love, and I'm revoking access. Mom's eyes widened as though I'd spoken a foreign language. Dad's face flushed crimson. The sound he made was half laugh, half bark. Ungrateful doesn't even cover it, he muttered, the words hitting the hardwood like dropped tools. I bent to zip my duffel. My hand was steady, my breath sure. In the reflective sheen of a framed family photo, Madison at 7 in a glitter dress, me at 10 holding her elbow, I saw myself rise, older and unshaken. There were no final hugs, no tearful scenes. Just Madison staring as if seeing a negative space where I'd once stood, Greg giving me a faint nod that tried to be apology, and Mom whispering my name on a loop that never found a sentence. I slipped on my coat and opened the door. Cold air poured in, sharpening every scent of cinnamon and wood smoke. Snowflakes spun beneath the porch light, bright for a second before dissolving into the dark. Behind me the fire cracked again, but no one followed. For the first time, the threshold felt like a boundary I set rather than one I begged to cross. I stepped into the night, boots crunching on new snow, and let the door click shut, soft, final, mine. Family is about loyalty, Dad snapped, blocking the narrow hallway like a stubborn oak. Then why didn't you ever choose me? I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but it echoed down the paneled corridor as snow pelted the windows behind us. A veil of condensation fogged the glass, turning the late afternoon light watery and dim. I was still standing, coat half-buttoned, duffel over my shoulder. Dad loomed in front of the front door rug, Mom and Madison hovered in the living room doorway. Greg lingered near the fireplace, one hand on the mantel as if testing its steadiness. Dad squared his shoulders. We fed you, clothed you, kept a roof. That's parenting, I said, meeting his stare. Not an investment expecting returns. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I remembered another moment, 7 years old, my favorite library book in Madison's sticky hands. She'd spun too fast, the spine snapping. I'd cried, she'd shrugged, my parents had laughed it off. Accidents happen, Emily, don't be dramatic. That was the first time I learned certain losses would always be shrugged away. Mom's fingers worried the edge of her cardigan. Your father doesn't mean it like that. Madison's phone was finally forgotten, her arms crossed over her chest. You don't know how hard it's been to be me, she said, voice tremulous. The pressure to be perfect. I almost laughed, not cruelly but from disbelief. Perfect? You were allowed to be human while I was told to be useful. Greg shifted, eyes flicking from Madison to me. Maybe we should listen, he murmured, so soft I barely caught it. No one replied, but the suggestion hung in the heavy air. Dad jabbed a finger at me. You're twisting this. We sacrificed for you, sports fees, band trips. Those are things parents choose, I interrupted. Sacrifice isn't a ledger you flash when the kids grow up. A long breath left him, his shoulders sagged, though the anger lingered in the lines of his jaw. Snow hissed against the window like static. The fire popped behind Greg, casting restless shadows across the room. I took a step back, widening the space between us. Physical distance felt like the first honest conversation we'd had in years. I'm grateful for what you provided, I said, softer now, but gratitude shouldn't cost me myself. Madison sniffed, wiping under her eyes. So cutting us off is self-care? Sounds cruel to me. It's not cruelty, I said. It's a boundary. Boundaries? Dad scoffed. This family never needed boundaries before. That was the problem, I replied, shoulders relaxing even as my pulse hammered. Loyalty without boundaries breeds entitlement. Mom's voice quivered. Emily, we can fix this, holidays together, phone calls. I shook my head. Only if it's built on respect. Not obligation. Greg's hand dropped from the mantel. Linda, he said gently, maybe Emily's right about the obligation part. It was the first time he'd used Mom's first name all afternoon, and it landed like a small stone in a still pond. Madison stared at him, stunned. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. The house creaked again, as though settling into a silence it didn't know how to hold. I straightened my coat. This isn't punishment, I said, letting the words find their own steady rhythm. It's self-respect. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then I turned toward the door. Boots, coat, bag, each action deliberate, a quiet ceremony of departure. Mom's voice cracked behind me. Please don't do this. I wrapped my scarf once, twice. The wool muffled my breath. I reached for the doorknob, pausing long enough to answer without looking back. I already did. The latch clicked. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Snowflakes swirled around the porch light, bright against the gathering dusk. I stepped onto the top step, the wooden boards groaning under my weight, and closed the door behind me with a gentle finality. Inside, muffled through the wall, I heard Dad's voice, low, maybe angry, maybe cracked with something else. I couldn't tell, and for once, I didn't lean in to decipher. The snow swallowed the sound, and the path to the street lay ahead, white and unclaimed. I tightened my grip on the duffel and walked toward the waiting twilight, each breath a cloud that disappeared into the falling night. I didn't slam the door. I closed it carefully, like sealing a letter I'd never send. The click echoed faintly behind me, more a sigh than a sound, as the wind pressed into my coat and reminded me where I was headed, forward. Snow had continued falling while we argued. Now it blanketed the porch railings and the driveway, smoothing every jagged footprint into soft forgetfulness. I stepped carefully onto the path, boots crunching, the cold biting with a kind of honesty I respected. Halfway down the walkway, I heard the door creak open behind me. For a moment, I thought it might be Mom. Maybe even Madison. But it was Greg. He didn't come all the way out, just stood on the edge of the steps, hands tucked into the sleeves of his jacket, eyes searching mine. "I think you were brave," he said, barely above a whisper. The snow swirled between us, and I nodded. That was all. No smile, no thank you. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because some acknowledgments are meant to linger in the air rather than be caught and pocketed. I turned and kept walking. The bus stop was 4 blocks away, and I didn't mind the distance. Each step stretched the silence. Each breath turned warm in the cold. No music in my ears, no phone in my hand, just me and the stillness. Cedar Rapids looked peaceful under snow, almost like a postcard if you squinted past the ghosts. At the corner, I passed the diner where we'd gone after high school graduation. I remembered giving that speech, looking out into a crowd and not seeing a single familiar face. They'd said they were too busy with Madison's piano recital. At the time, I smiled and said I understood. Now, I let the memory drift away like steam. The bus was already at the stop, its engine humming low. I climbed on, paid in cash, and moved to a seat near the middle. There were only 3 other passengers, an older man reading a farming magazine, a teenage girl with earbuds, and someone asleep across 2 seats in the back. I took the window seat, tucked my bag beside me, and leaned my head against the glass. The town rolled by slowly, brick storefronts, shuttered gas stations, snow-laced trees, all fading into fields as we left the neighborhood. My phone buzzed once. I glanced down, a weather alert. The rest was silence. No texts. No missed calls. No family group chat bubbling with memes or check-ins. Just empty icons. I unlocked the screen and hovered over the family thread, the fam red heart, Madison had once named it, complete with sparkles and heart emojis. It had started when I moved to Chicago, meant to keep us all close. Over time, it became a bulletin board of needs, jokes I never found funny, and links to gift registries I never signed up for. I opened the thread. Scrolled. Birthday reminders. Grocery lists. Madison selfies. A meme from Dad, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I stared at that one longer than I expected. Then I tapped delete conversation. A prompt appeared, "Are you sure?" I pressed yes. Next, family photos. A shared album. Gone. Group plan, Disney 2021. I didn't go. Gone. Linda, Mom. I paused, then archived instead. By the time the bus hit the highway, my screen read, "No new notifications." I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The kind of breath that makes space in your lungs for something new. Outside, the snow-covered field stretched endlessly, clean, untouched, quiet. I watched them blur past, mile after mile, and felt strangely light. Not because I'd won. There was no winning. Just releasing. Just choosing myself for once and meaning it. We passed a billboard advertising fireworks for New Year's, half covered in frost. "Start fresh," it blared in faded red letters. I smiled, a small one, just to myself. The sun was dipping low, its light cold and forgiving. I pulled my scarf tighter and leaned back in my seat, watching the horizon fold into itself. For once, there were no expectations to manage, no apologies to phrase, no conversations to rehearse. Just me. just movement. I wired the money Monday morning, no memo line, no cheery subject, just a receipt in my online banking app that read paid in full. The university's bursar confirmed within minutes. A neat, emotionless transaction. For the first time in weeks, I felt the hum of anxiety flatten to a low, manageable pulse. Mid-January sunlight spilled into my Chicago apartment, bouncing off snowdrifts piled against the curb outside. The city looked scrubbed clean, the sky a bright, brittle blue. I set my laptop aside and folded my hands, palms up on the kitchen counter, as if expecting to feel something grand, pride, sadness, release. What arrived instead was a small, quiet peace, like the hush after a good snowfall. I remembered a line I'd highlighted in a library book years ago: when you stop expecting closure, peace finds you. I whispered the words, letting them settle the way snow settles on empty steps. My phone buzzed. Voicemail, Mom. I stared at the little red "duh," then pressed play, holding the device at arm's length. "Hi, sweetheart," her voice began, soft, stretched thin. I just wanted to say we love you. We're processing everything. Call when you can." The message ended in a hush, as though she hoped silence might draw me back. I didn't call. Not then. I poured a mug of coffee, its aroma drifting through my apartment, earthy, steadying. On the windowsill, my tiny potted pine still wore its fairy lights from December. I left them twinkling, a reminder that small celebrations could survive even in empty rooms. The computer pinged with new mail: Madison Hanson, tuition. I opened it, heart steady. "Hey Em. Thanks for taking care of the payment. Things have been complicated. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. Maybe once the semester calms down we can chat?" M. No direct apology. Sorry if you felt hurt. A conditional peace offering, wrapped in vagueness. I hovered over reply, fingertips resting on the keys. Words formed in my head, sharp at first, then softer, more measured. I'd love a real apology. Delete. We need to talk about respect. Delete. The cursor blinked. I exhaled and closed the window without typing a single word. Instead, I opened my journal. The pages smelled faintly of ink and lavender from a sachet tucked inside the cover. In neat script I wrote: I don't need her to see me. I just need to see myself. I underlined "see myself" twice, then sat back and let the quiet do its work. Outside, a bus hissed at the corner. Somewhere upstairs a neighbor practiced scales on an electric keyboard, tentative, hopeful notes rising through the floorboards. Another buzz. Madison this time, text bubbles stacking into a plea: "Did you get my email? Please respond." My thumb hovered above the notification. With a few taps, I opened her contact, scrolled to block this caller, and pressed confirm. Not out of anger required a return on investment. This was protection, plain and simple. The silence that followed was remarkable. No vibration, no ding, just the distant hum of the fridge and the stray piano notes above. My shoulders loosened. I closed my notebook, slid it onto the shelf, and opened a browser tab. The search field blinked, blank and expectant, an invitation rather than a request. I typed solo travel destinations for spring and hit return. Images bloomed: deserts in bloom, rocky coastlines, small towns with farmers' markets and porch swings. Each picture felt like a window propped open, letting fresh air into a stale room. I bookmarked a trail in New Mexico, a guest house in Maine with hammocks overlooking the ocean, a community art retreat in Oregon. None of it was a plan yet, just proof that somewhere beyond this apartment, beyond old scripts and overdue apologies, life was waiting with its arms wide. My phone screen rested dark beside the keyboard, no red dots, no insistence. No new notifications. I traced the phrase with my eyes, testing its edges like a newly healed scar. It didn't sting. It simply existed, neutral and whole. Outside, sunlight slid across the floor in slow increments. I let it warm my feet as I started a new tab, train routes with panoramic windows. The keys clicked under my fingers, crisp and purposeful. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't writing a response or calculating a rescue. I was drafting possibilities, terms and conditions set by me, for me. And peace, quiet and unassuming, found its seat beside me in the light. Rain pressed against my windows in gentle sheets, blurring the skyline beyond the train tracks. March had come to Chicago with that soft, tentative gray that makes the city feel like a pencil sketch half erased. Inside, I'd lit a candle that smelled of lilac and cut grass, more spring than the weather could commit to, and scattered a few new paperbacks across the coffee table like seeds waiting to sprout. I settled onto the couch, tea cooling beside me, and opened Madison's email. From Madison Hanson. Subject: Can we talk? Hey I've been doing a lot of work on myself these past few weeks, therapy, journaling, really digging deep. I miss you. I know things got tense, but I feel like we can move forward. It's been a hard year for me, and I could really use my sister back. Maybe we can start fresh? Let me know when you're free. Love. M. No specifics. No mention of Christmas, the lie, or the tuition. Just a vague cloud of work on myself and a request to hit the reset button without acknowledging where the game left off. I clicked open my journal, digital now, easier to search, and reread a line I'd typed the night I blocked her number. If they can't admit, they can't repair. The words pulsed on the screen like a heartbeat. Rain drummed harder. I could almost feel the building sigh under the weight of it. Somewhere upstairs, the neighbor's dog scratched at the door, restless. The city, for all its noise, had moments when everything felt hushed and listening. I put my fingertips to the keyboard and began a draft. Hi Madison. Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you're taking time for yourself. At this point, I paused, staring at the blinking cursor. My shoulders tightened. The sentence sounded diplomatic, safe, like something I'd say in a staff meeting, not to the sister who had reshaped years of my life with a handful of half-truths. I tried again. Madison. Healing requires honesty. I haven't seen that yet in your words. I read it aloud, voice echoing off the walls. It rang theatrical, a line delivered to an audience that had already decided the plot. Delete. The candle's flame wobbled, throwing shadows across my book stacks. Titles about boundaries, travel guides to places with big skies, a slim poetry collection that promised tiny oases of hope. I exhaled slowly, letting the scent of lilac fill my lungs. Another attempt. Maddie. I'm still hurt. I need space. Please respect that. Short, clear, and still, performative, a courteous note to keep her from calling me the villain when she told the story later. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either, and the most important audience this time was me. I saved the draft. Then I highlighted the text, dragged it into a folder I'd labeled unsent, the same place I'd filed every message I'd written in moments of doubt, anger, late-night nostalgia. Words I needed to say for my own clarity, not for anyone else's ears. As the email vanished from my active drafts, the rain eased, swapping its drumbeat for a gentle hiss. I closed the laptop and leaned back, watching droplets race each other down the glass. My reflection hovered faintly, soft hair escaping a bun, candlelight warming the edges of my face. I looked, quiet. Whole. The phone lay face down on the table. I left it that way. Nothing urgent awaited me there, not the kind of urgent that wouldn't still be around tomorrow, anyway. I picked up a paperback instead, pages smelling like ink and possibility, and read half a poem about birds navigating headwinds, adjusting their wings in tiny increments invisible to anyone on the ground. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen. I let it sit. Outside, a train horn called and faded into distance. Time folded gently, making room for stillness. At last, I whispered to the quiet apartment, to the unread email, the candle, the stack of books, and to myself, growth is knowing you don't need the last word. Chicago's first truly warm weekend arrived like a long-promised letter finally delivered. Sunlight slipped between high-rise facades and spilled over the lakefront path, turning the water a bright, forgiving blue. On my little balcony, the potted pine from December now sat beside terracotta containers of basil, pansies, and a cherry tomato seedling that leaned toward the light with quiet optimism. I loosened the soil with my fingers, added a splash of compost tea, and pressed the earth down gently, the way you might tuck a child's blanket. A breeze carried the faint scent of magnolia from trees lining the street below. I leaned on the railing, watching petals swirl over parked cars, confetti for no one in particular. My phone lay face down on the kitchen table inside. Even with the sliding door open, I couldn't hear it, couldn't feel it calling. Its silence felt lighter than any ringtone ever had. Later, I walked to my neighborhood cafe, past sidewalk planters bursting with tulips. Inside, baristas moved at an easy Saturday pace, steaming milk, laughing under the hiss of espresso. The chalkboard read first iced lattes of spring, try OAT vanilla. I ordered one and stood by the window, letting the cold cup chase residual winter from my hands. Emily? I turned to see Tasha, a friend from college I hadn't spoken to in years, holding a matcha in one hand and a canvas tote in the other. Her hair was shorter, her smile the same. We slid into a sunny corner booth, condensation from our drinks pooling on the wooden table. We compared cliffs of time, her new job at a museum, my remote projects, the city's shifting skyline. When she asked about family, I told her the truth, but softly, as if describing a road I'd chosen not to take rather than a battlefield left smoldering. I've been learning what silence really means, I said, stirring ice cubes with my straw. It's not emptiness. It's space. Tasha nodded, eyes kind. She didn't press. Sometimes conversations don't need deep excavation, they just need daylight. We parted with a gentle hug and the promise of a summer farmer's market visit. Outside, the lake shimmered through budding trees. Joggers passed, couples picnicked, dogs chased frisbees that sailed like bright moons against the grass. I found an empty bench and sat, letting the sun warm my shoulders. A pink petal landed on my jeans. I watched it flutter away on a tiny gust, weightless. My mind drifted to that December night when I'd stared at holiday lights blinking on other people's balconies. Back then, the flashes had felt like reminders of everything I lacked. Now, cherry blossoms replaced colored bulbs, and their quiet unfolding seemed to echo my own. A gull cried overhead, children's laughter rose in response. I closed my eyes and breathed, just once, deep and unguarded, and nothing inside me braced for impact. Later, I wandered into a neighborhood bookstore, the bell above the door chiming a soft welcome. Dust motes danced in slanted sunbeams between tall shelves. I ran my fingertips over spines, mysteries, essays, field guides to edible plants, feeling no tug of obligation, no list in my pocket of what anyone else might want. Near the window display, a slim paperback caught my eye, a collection of travel essays titled Small Roads, Big Hearts. No occasion, no rationale, just curiosity. I bought it, tucking the receipt into the pages like a private bookmark. Walking home, I resisted the instinct to check my phone. The weight in my tote bag was satisfaction enough. On my block, teenagers balanced on skateboards, their laughter ricocheting off brick. A neighbor watered hanging baskets, sending arcs of droplets that fractured the sun into quick rainbows. Inside my apartment, afternoon light painted golden rectangles across the floor. I set the book on the coffee table, brewed mint tea, and cracked the window to let birdsong mix with distant traffic. The room smelled of lilac candle and fresh soil from the balcony pots. I reached for my phone at last. The lock screen was bare, no badges, no missed calls, no breathless texts asking for more. Just the time, blinking steady and unhurried. I placed it back, face up this time, and felt no pull to refresh. I opened the new book, traced the first sentence, "A journey can begin in the space between breaths," and smiled at its gentle audacity. Outside, petals drifted past the window like pale confessions, honest and soft. I turned the page. Sometimes the quietest seasons leave the deepest marks. That spring, I didn't go back, I simply chose not to, and that choice made all the difference. In life, we often wait for others to see us, to understand us. But healing doesn't always come from being heard, it comes from learning to stand with yourself. Family can be love, but love without respect is only weight. If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Sometimes, in telling and listening, we find a bit of peace for ourselves too.